Every week I get the most fantastic questions in the comment sections of my videos. And in this video, I'm going to try to answer some of the difficult English grammar questions that I have had from you. Questions such as the ones which you can see on the screen now. Now, I've gone back through the last 3 months of my videos to look for your questions, so I've missed some along the way, I'm sure. If I've missed your question, then please pop it in the comment section to this video, and I'll try and include it in a future video of this type. Let's start with this really good question. Is except followed by the infinitive or the gerund? In other words, are both of these examples grammatically correct? She doesn't have to do anything except cook a little, or she doesn't have to do anything except cooking a little. Are there some rules which guide us here? Well, fortunately, there are. And the main rules are quite straightforward. So in most cases, what follows except would be the same as if you were writing a normal sentence without except. So usually if the main verb is followed by to plus infinitive, then you use except plus to plus infinitive. She wanted to study at college. That would be a typical sentence. She wanted nothing except to study at college. Can you see the mirroring between the first sentence without except and then the second sentence which does have except? Wanted is a verb that is followed by to plus infinitive, and that's true whether we have except or not. Similarly, if the main verb is followed by a gerund, use except plus gerund. Enjoy is a verb of this type. She enjoyed studying at college. She enjoyed nothing except studying at college. So far quite simple. But there are a few more things to bear in mind before we rush on to the next topic. First of all, if the clause after except is an imperative, you could use the bare imperative here. So let's start with a sentence, they told me to run. So that's an order. Now, if we turn that into reported speech, they said nothing except to run. But we could also make it an imperative. They said nothing except run. In other words, what did they say? Run. The order was a run. Run was an imperative, and in the imperative form we can have the verb without anything before it. Secondly, some verbs can take the gerund or the infinitive, and it's important to remember that. We'll come back to that in another point later in this video. So I tried everything except to run. I tried everything except running. Both of these are acceptable because there are forms where you can have tried plus the to plus infinitive and tried plus the gerund. Both are possible with a slight change in meaning, which I'll come to later. And then we have this interesting example, which is with the verb to do. Now, in most contexts, the verb to do can be followed by except and then the bare infinitive, or except followed by the gerund. It seems to be a unique verb in English. Now, this week, I've gone through hundreds of verbs to see if there are other verbs which do the same. I haven't found one that is the same as do yet, but there are thousands of verbs in English, so if you can think of one and you think maybe that I've missed one, pop it in the comments, let us all know. But as far as I'm aware, do is quite unique here because both of these sentences are possible. I did nothing except cook, and I did nothing except cooking. It's not the same as a verb which can be followed by either the gerund or the infinitive, because that's not true of the verb to do in a normal sentence. If I used a normal sentence, I would say I did cooking, not I did to cook or I did cook. It would just be cooking here. But it seems to be that with except after to do, you have both of these possibilities. Okay, let's move on to the next question that I received. Now, in the last video I posted, one of you asked this question. What is the difference between should you or if you or if you should in a conditional sentence. So let's look at some potential examples. Should you need help, you can ask a member of staff. And this seems very similar to the next example. If you need help, you can ask a member of staff. And to some extent, should and if are indeed interchangeable here. If I said, should you need help or if you need help, I'm achieving the same thing. I'm presenting a condition that then leads to a certain outcome if the condition is met. You need help, here's the outcome, or here's what could come next. But there is a slight difference with should. If you use should, you add a sense of in case and a sense that the situation is less likely to happen. Let's use the example to explain more clearly how this works. I don't expect you to need help, but should you need help, you can ask a member of staff. Can you see how the meaning is in case here? The first sentence tells us it's not likely. We're not expecting you to need this help. It's an unlikely situation, although it could happen. It's not completely hypothetical. It could happen. It's just the likelihood is low. But should you need help? So here it's a response to something that is less likely than if. Now you could have used if here. It wouldn't be wrong, but should carries that extra emphasis on this is just in case. This is not a strong likelihood. It's also worth bearing in mind that should is considered more formal than if. So if you're trying to be more formal with this kind of situation, particularly if you're offering something to someone, then should is useful in this case. And what about if you should? Well, if you should can be used in exactly the same way as should. So everything I've said about should you applies to if you should as well. Let's go on to a topic that we looked at briefly earlier, but I said would come back to. And this is another question I received recently. When do we use the gerund or infinitive after verbs? And in one sense, we have to appreciate here that there's quite a lot to learn. And so it may be useful to take a longer course to go through all of the different examples, or certainly to go into them in more detail. This is a topic that requires a careful study all on its own. I have a long section on gerunds and infinitives in my Perfect English Grammar course. So if you want to go into a lot more detail on this, perhaps this course would be a better option for you. There is a link in the description if you want to look at that. But now I'm going to go through briefly the most important things you need to know. First of all, some verbs are followed by another verb in the gerund form, verb plus ing. That's what I mean by gerund. And some are followed by to plus infinitive. So I anticipate going to college. Anticipate is followed by the ing form. So anticipate, and then if you use the word go afterwards, the verb go, then it's going. But want is followed by to plus infinitive. So I want to go to college. There's that difference that happens. Secondly, some verbs are followed by either a gerund or infinitive with no meaning change at all. So verbs such as continue, like, love, start, you'll often see them being followed by a to plus infinitive or a gerund. I like to play, I like playing. There's little difference in meaning. Thirdly, some verbs are followed by either a gerund or infinitive, but this time there is a meaning change. Compare I tried climbing the tree, which is where you're experimenting with something. Maybe you're doing it for the first time. Compare that to I tried to climb the tree. This indicates a sense of effort and possibly a failed attempt. I tried to climb the tree, but I couldn't. Here the emphasis is on trying as hard as you can. With the first one, I tried climbing, the emphasis is more on experimenting with something different. Other examples of verbs that are followed by either a gerund or infinitive are stop, go on, forget, quit, regret, remember. Fourthly, though, active verbs can often be turned into a noun by using the gerund form, sometimes called the present participle. Look at the example in blue here. Wanting to go to college is the most common intention of school children. So notice that wanting comes from the verb want, and it's taking the subject position. So we've turned the verb into a noun. We've made it the subject of the sentence. And usually we do this with the ing form. There is a possibility that you can use to plus infinitive sometimes. This creates a noun meaning the subject of. So for example, to play piano well, the subject of playing piano well is my long-term aim. This is not used very much though. Now it's worth going a little bit away from the question as well. The question focuses on gerund and infinitive after verbs, but it's worth pointing out that infinitives also have other roles too. And in number 5, we look at how to plus infinitive can also be used as adjectives to describe nouns or adverbs to describe sentences, such as in this is the best book to read. Here, to read is describing the noun, book, and I was happy to find this book. Here, to find this book is an adverb describing the adjective happy. And finally, number 6, some verbs are followed by the bare infinitive, such as make and let. But again, all these things need more study, more time. I'm just covering the basic principles of gerund and infinitive here. Another related question is, what are the rules for preposition followed by gerund? Because we have this common pattern where a preposition is usually followed by verb plus ing if you're using the verb after the preposition, similar to converting a verb into a subject. So I am interested in gaming. Here, gaming comes from the verb to game. But I've just included a different example below. I am determined to win. So what's the difference here? What do we need to bear in mind? Normally, prepositions are followed by the gerund. I am good at playing basketball. At is the preposition, playing is the gerund. But this becomes more complicated when the preposition is to. As we can see in the examples below, we have I am hoping to play basketball, to plus infinitive, and I am devoted to learning how to play basketball, which may have surprised some of you. So let's dive deeper into this. Now, in the majority of situations, to is followed by the infinitive. So I wanted to play. So to followed by the infinitive. But to is followed by the gerund in a few situations. Firstly, after the verbal phrase looking forward to. They are looking forward to seeing you. Looking forward to is a particular structure that's followed by this gerund. Then also some adjectives derived from verbs to do with attitude or intent. Verbs such as dedicated, committed, devoted. We can all have to followed by the gerund. She is dedicated to improving her skills. He is committed to becoming a better player. I'm devoted to training the team. So verbs like these sometimes have to plus the gerund, but not always. You have to learn them individually. These ones work, some others don't. And also in the structure be used to. So that's the verb to be, then used to. We have the gerund after to. They are used to seeing you on Saturday, so please make sure you come this Saturday too. Be used to plus gerund form. Here's a great question that I really enjoyed a couple of weeks ago, which was, is would have had to have been correct? We have the verb have 3 times in one verb phrase, which seems really confusing. For example, I would have had to have been at home. Well, is this right or wrong? Well, the answer is yes, it is correct. Think about this sentence here. At certain times during COVID, people would have had to have been at home. Let's break this down. Would have had to. What does this mean? Well, it's two possibilities. It could have been a past hypothetical necessity. So would have as the hypothetical phrase in the third conditional, and had to being a phrase for necessity. It could also have been a recurring past situation involving a requirement. Here, would takes on its special use in the past for recurring past situations. The next bit, have been, after would have had to, introduces something in a certain way at a certain time in the past. So if we go back to the example, at certain times during COVID, people would have had to. So it was necessary during those times, recurring past situation. What was necessary? To have been at home. Basically, do this in this way. Be at home. It works, but it's a little bit of what we call a mouthful, having the same word several times. It's not particularly coherent. And we could even make this more complex, but even more incoherent by doing this. At certain times during COVID, people would have had to have had a negative test to leave home. Grammatically, it works. I don't advise using it because it is a bit confusing. Someone has asked me this question: explain simple sentences and compound sentences. And at a first glance, you might think, well, this is actually a fairly simple question. But there are a few things to consider that may not be so obvious at first, that you may not have thought about. So here's an example of a simple sentence and a compound sentence. The cat slept on the chair. That's the simple sentence. The cat slept and the dog barked. That's the compound sentence. So what makes it a simple sentence? What makes it a compound sentence? Let's start with the simple sentences. So every simple sentence has a subject and a verb. The cat slept on the chair. The cat is the subject and slept is the verb. But let's just add the complexity a little bit here. It is still a simple sentence if there is one subject and a compound verb. What's a compound verb? This is two verbs that combine to create one verb phrase. For example, the child stroked and groomed the cat. Stroked and groomed are two activities, but here they're put together as one verb phrase connected by and. There's one subject doing two things at the same time. It could even have been 3, 4 or 5, potentially. But in this situation where one subject does two things at the same time, it's still a simple sentence, even though we've got two verbs. Equally, it is still a simple sentence if there is a compound subject, which is two nouns that combine to create one subject. The boy and the girl stroked the cat. So two people do one thing at the same time. It's still a simple sentence. Now, a simple sentence can also be preceded or followed by an adverbial phrase. And this is where it may seem a bit confusing at first, because at first it looks like we've got two clauses here. It looks as if the sentence has become more than just simple. It's worth bearing in mind the word simple is a phrase to describe the grammatical situation. It's not to say that it's simple because it's easy. Look at the examples though. Resting from her busy night hunting mice, the cat slept on the chair. Or the cat slept on the chair, resting from her busy night hunting mice. It's still a simple sentence. We only have one main subject and one main verb. The cat is the subject, slept is the verb. The phrase in bold is what's called an adverbial phrase. It's adding extra information about the rest of the sentence. But it doesn't count as a full clause. The phrases in bold are not separate clauses because their verbs do not take tense. Resting will stay the same regardless of the tense of slept. If we say the cat sleeps on the chair, resting will stay resting. If we say the cat had slept on the chair, it would still be resting. It's no longer a verb that takes tense. It's simply something to describe the main sentence, in this case, the simple sentence. And if the phrase at the beginning or the end has a verb that doesn't change according to tense, then it doesn't affect whether the main sentence or the main clause is simple or not. It remains a simple sentence, even though it looks like it's got two clauses. Now on to the compound sentences. A compound sentence contains two independent clauses that both have their own subjects and verbs. They are linked by a coordinating conjunction. Those are words such as and, but, or. For example, the shop closed early, but she was able to buy everything she needed. So here we have two independent clauses that both have their own subjects and verb. The first one is shop is the subject, closed is the verb. The second one, she is the subject and was able is the verb there. They're both completely independent activities of each other, and both verbs take tense. Closed is past simple, was able is past simple. We could have changed it to the shop closes early, but she is able. So they can take tense here. And they're joined together by words such as and, but, or. Now, bear in mind that just using and or but or doesn't automatically indicate a compound sentence. As we saw in the previous example, if and or but or is joining two subjects or two verbs done by the same subject, then it's not an indication we've got a compound sentence. It's only if we join two clauses that could be independent sentences all on their own. Now, why is this a compound sentence but the next sentence not? So look at the words in green at the bottom. Although the shop closed early, she was able to buy everything she needed. It looks almost exactly the same, but this is not a compound sentence. Why? Because although is a subordinating conjunction. Subordinating conjunctions are words such as although or because or while. These introduce clauses that cannot be independent. Let's think about this a bit more. Why is it not independent? Well, the word although introduces extra meaning and an extra relationship between the two parts. Although the shop closed early, she was able to buy everything she needed. So the shop closed early is not standing on its own here. Although tells us that there was some sort of problem here. There was a problem. The shop closed early, which might make us think that she couldn't buy everything she needed, but in spite of that, she did. If you separate the two sentences then and delete although, you lose that meaning. It ends up being two separate things. The shop closed early. She was able to buy everything she needed. You don't have that connection, that completeness of meaning of there was a problem that we overcame, which is what although does here. Doesn't but do the same thing? Not quite. The shop closed early, but she was able to buy everything she needed. Here, the two sentences are independent. They don't have to be connected to each other. But is simply making a comment about how they relate together. The shop closed early, but she was able to buy everything she needed. But here doesn't automatically tell us that there was the problem in the same way that although does. But simply comments on the fact that there was some sort of difference going on here. One sentence had a problem, the other one didn't. But simply indicates there is a difference, but it doesn't attach the two together in terms of meaning in the way that although does. So when we use although, that's something called a complex sentence, where we have the dependent clause and the independent clause, pull the dependent clause away from the independent clause and we lose some of the meaning. The compound sentence is connected by the coordinating conjunctions, where the two sentences still just have complete independent meaning, but we're just making a comment on something about whether and would be similarity, but would be difference. We're just making a comment on that. Grammatically, that is what's called a compound sentence, when we join them with and, but, so, for, words such as those, coordinating conjunctions, but the clauses stay independent. Let's move on to another similar question then. Analyse the different dependent clauses. I've got two examples here that have different types of clauses. The cat slept when everyone was out. the cat slept in the chair that no one sat in. I'm going to cover this very briefly. This is another topic that needs much more time, but just to very quickly let you know what the different dependent clauses are. In general, we group dependent clauses into three types. First of all, adverb clauses. And these describe a particular verb or a particular adjective or a whole sentence. The example we have here is describing a verb. The cat slept. How did the cat sleep? When everyone else was out. So this is describing the verb sleep. It tells us more about the situation of the sleep. The sleep happened in this way when everyone else was out. And the relative pronoun when introduces this extra clause. Everyone else was out, was being the verb. We can also have adjective clauses, also known as relative clauses, and these describe a noun. The cat slept in the chair. Tell me more about this chair. That no one sat in. So no one sat in is the clause, and the relative pronoun that links this clause to the chair. It's just describing the chair, the noun. It's not describing the way that the cat sleeps here. And we have noun clauses. These take a subject or object position in a sentence. The cat chased what it thought was a mouse. So we have a full clause here. It thought was a mouse. Now, why is this a noun clause? Why is this different? Why is this not describing the verb? Well, the key thing is that the clause after the verb describes what it chased, and what normally reflects a noun. The cat chased a mouse. The cat chased a bird. The cat chased what it thought was a mouse. So you can see here that it's a noun clause. It replaces what would normally be in the noun position. It's not telling us how it chased. The cat chased in a hurry. The cat chased quickly. It's not got adverb qualities here. It's replacing the noun. A question I received recently was this. Can we use modal plus have plus past participle for future time? Now, if you go back to any of my recent videos on tenses, I do explain this, but let's explain it again quickly here. Compare these two sentences. Are they both possible? It might have been fun last week. It might have been fun next week. Now, instinctively, you might think the first example is right and the second is wrong. That's not the case. Let's explore more. So the quick answer is, can we use modal plus have plus past participle for future time? The answer is yes, you can. Let's look at the main use first. This structure is usually used for past logical deduction. Let's think through this example. I was invited to an interview last week, but I couldn't go. Maybe I didn't have a car, it was too far, maybe I got ill. And we're using past logical deduction to think about if. If I had gone, it might have been a great opportunity. I didn't go, but I'm thinking, well, let's imagine I did go. What would the outcome have been? So it might have been modal plus have plus past participle been. This is the typical way that we use the structure, and it's for the past. But now compare to the following. It can also be used when these three things occur. A, something was planned to happen in the future. The plan was in the past for something after now. B, it can no longer happen. And C, you are imagining the future being different to what is now going to be. So let's take this same example again. I was invited to an interview for next week, but I won't be able to go. Maybe your car will be in the garage. Maybe you've got something else going on at the same time, but you won't be able to go. It might have been a great opportunity. So look at how the colours match the ABC here. I was invited to an interview for next week. there was a plan in the past for something happening in the future. I won't be able to go. It can no longer happen. It might have been a great opportunity. You are imagining the future being different to what is now going to be. Modal plus have plus past participle for future time. Sometimes people have asked me about this. Can will plus verb be the same as will have plus verb? Let's look at a few different situations revolving around this example. The ice caps will melt by 2100, 2100. I'm not quite sure how people are going to say this year yet. It tends to evolve when we get there. And the ice caps will have melted by 2100 or 2100 years. Are these both correct? Yes, they are. But let's first of all look at the main way in which will plus verb and will have plus verb differ. So will plus verb plus a time phrase. Here the focus is on the time phrase. The ice caps will melt in the future. What are we focused on? This time in the future, whatever time in the future we're imagining. Next week, next year, next decade, next century. The time phrase is the focus. At that time, the ice caps will melt. When you have will have plus verb, and then we commonly use by in this structure, by 2100, the focus is on the time between now and 2100 years. The ice caps will have melted by 2100 years. So it might happen at that time, but it might also happen before. So it adds that extra bit of meaning. But this becomes less, the distinction becomes less clear when you add by 2100 to will plus verb plus time phrase. If the time phrase itself has by 2100, this in itself suggests a time leading up to 2100. So because of that, by causes will plus verb to have the same meaning as will plus have plus verb, because by focuses us to do the same thing. By always tells us that it's from a moment in time up to another moment in time. And here's the last one. How are two past perfect tenses possible in a single sentence? Is this possible, for example? I had washed my hair and she had brushed her teeth. Is it correct? Well, yes, it is, but it's not always correct in all situations to use two past perfect tenses in a single sentence. If you have a clause with the past perfect followed by a subordinating clause, usually no. I had stopped because he was tired. If the subordinating clause is simply giving more information that explains the main clause, revert back to the past simple. However, unless the issue in the subordinating clause is clearly before the activity in the main clause. Look at the picture and think about the thought process here. I had stopped driving because one of my tyres had gone flat. Now, the two things would clearly not happen at the same time. Clearly, the tyre goes flat first, then afterwards you stop driving. So to indicate that the tyre went flat first, use the past perfect in that case, as well as with I had stopped driving. Of course, this all depends on the context of what you're saying. To use the past perfect, then you need to be indicating that something happened before another thing, and the flow of time doesn't make that clear already. Yeah, the flow of time in the story. So assuming that the conditions are met to use I had stopped driving in the context of my story, I could then use a subordinating clause that also has the past perfect if that too is something that happened before to affect the reason why I had stopped driving. Now let's move on to clauses with the past perfect followed by a coordinator and then another clause. And in these cases, yes, you can use the past perfect twice. I had washed my hair and she had brushed her teeth. You've got two independent clauses here, connected by a coordinating conjunction, and because they're independent, we treat them equally. So if the past perfect should apply to one of them, then if the second clause happens at the same time and has the same effect, then apply the past perfect to that one too. Unless the subject is the same for both clauses, and in this case we tend to omit had. I washed my hair and brushed my teeth. It's like creating a list of similar grammatical items. Washed my hair, which is verb and then object. Brush my teeth, verb and then object. We omit what we don't need to repeat because everything relates back to I here. So I hope you've enjoyed that. I hope some of you have received answers to the questions that you've asked me in the comments section. If you didn't, please put your question in the comments section to this video. I will go through them, make a list of any questions you have. If I can answer them quickly in this comment section, then I will do that. But I will also use some of the questions to form another video like this in the near future.